Untitled Football Podcast to another episode. Today we're going to talk about the NFC South. You know, um, I don't think I'm not going to waste too much time. Episode number 2. Last time we talked about the NFC West. Today's the South. And we're going to start it off with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who added Tom Brady in the offseason. And they got rid of Jameis Winston, who, pretty polarizing quarterback. A lot of people love him. Some people think he's trash. I think, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, as it always is. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't good. He's bad and good at the same time. He's like an average quarterback, but he's like a different version. Because typically when you think of average quarterback, you think of a guy like an Andy Dalton. But I guess Jameis is average because of how good he is and how bad he is at the same time. So that all equals out to him being an average quarterback. And Tom Brady is above average. He wasn't the same best quarterback in the league, Tom Brady, but he was I think the supporting cast really dragged him down last year in New England, as it was pretty bad, really bad. But now they don't. Now he has a good supporting cast with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Gronk, Tyler Johnson, who I liked as a 6th-round pick. Maybe a little bit higher than that too. Maybe 4th, 3rd round for Tyler Johnson. I feel like he could play in the slot day one for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They added Tristan Wirfs. They added and added the other O-lineman, did they? If I'm not mistaken. But they have one of the better O-lines probably in the NFL. Donovan Smith is okay. He's not terrible. I think the perception on him is lower than how good he might actually be. He's pretty good, but when he gets beat bad. When he gets he gets beat bad, but he allowed the same amount of pressures as David Bakhtiari this past season. So on more pass blocking snaps. So Donovan Smith was pretty good. He just gave up sacks, which aren't always the O-line's fault. Sometimes it's more the quarterback's fault, due to bad pocket presence, holding on to the ball forever. All things that Jameis Winston does. So yeah, Donovan Smith is better than his perception. And they have Ali Marpet, Ryan Jensen, Tristan Wirfs. It could be a good offensive line. And if Tom Brady does the stuff that he typically does to protect the offensive line and make them look better than they maybe actually are, then, they could be pretty good. But if they're running the full Arians offense, there isn't much quick passing game in that. Because, if we were to look... Oh, yeah, and this is one of the reasons why I didn't think he would go here. Because the scheme fit's not that good. From, maybe Brady could play in this system, but, we haven't seen him do something like this in, since, 2007. So, I always thought it was, an awkward, square peg into a round hole type of deal. But, he's here. There's a ton of weapons. I don't see how they're bad, honestly, because Brady's still a good quarterback. They could be a little bit rough early on. But, yeah. But just looking at, the areas that Tom Brady targeted last year versus the areas Jameis targeted last year. Brady targeted more in the 0 to 9 range, more in the behind the line of scrimmage. The short game. He had one of the lower ADOTs in the NFL. And Jameis had one of the highest ADOTs in the NFL. That alone in itself is that in itself is crazy because Brady's been on the conservative end for the past couple of years, kinda. I wouldn't say he's been downright conservative, but he's skewed more conservative over the past couple of years. And Jameis is hyper aggressive. Like, Jameis and Tom Brady are polar opposites. And them running the same offense would probably be a bit weird. But even with that being said, I still have high hopes for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this year. Because, like, I mean, like, they're just good all around. Like, they have a ton of weapons. Like, honestly, maybe the best, like, supporting cast of weapons in the NFL, with, like, tight ends included. Like receiving running backs, receivers, all this type of stuff. They have weapons everywhere on the field. And, like, I don't see their offense being bad. But I could see it being a bit rough earlier on in the season because of how awkward the scheme fit is and how drastic of a change this is for Tom Brady being in the same system for 20 years straight. So it could be rough early on. But still, even with that being said, the talent in the receiving talent is so overwhelmingly good that, like, even though it might be rough, the outcomes still might not be bad. Like even though they might be, like, you know, there might be some miscommunication, some all this and all that, but they have guys that take less communication by the fact that they are receivers that, you know, they're not guys that take a ton of timing to, you know, master. But Mike Evans and Gronk, they can catch the ball with people draped on them. So, like, you know, you can get a couple get a couple of those plays sprinkled in, and, you know, some big plays that swing the momentum of the games. But, like, yeah, they play the Saints game 1. That's going to be a really good game. And I think the Saints would probably win that, you know, just because, I mean, I don't know how good the Bucs will be straight out of the gate. I do think they'll be a better team later on in the season. Like, I do think they are Super Bowl contenders. Just, like, their roster's pretty good top to bottom. Even though it might not even be the best roster top to bottom in their division, I still think it is a pretty good roster. But let's swing over to the defensive side of the ball. They have a good defense. They bought in Antoine Winfield, who I was really high on in the draft. Like, I had a borderline first round grade on him, but they got him in the second, like mid-second. You know, that's a good pick. Like, they have a good defense. They had, down the stretch at least, one of the best cornerback duos in the NFL. Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean, after, like, week 8 combined for, like, the most pass breakups in the NFL from any cornerback duo in the NFL. They have a pretty good overall defense, which, like, you know, it might not have showed in the box score, but, like, when your quarterback turns the ball over 30 times, it's, like, sort of difficult to, like, show up on the box score as a good defense. And Tom Brady, who should take more care of the ball than Jameis Winston, the defense is going to look better because of that. The defense is going to look better because you're not going to be on defense 30 extra times because your quarterback's turning the ball over. Tom Brady will probably get care of the ball, even though, like, this is a kind of a different system, and he's maybe going to skew a bit more turnover prone and turnover heavy than he typically does. But, like, I still don't think he'll throw 30 picks. Like, I don't even know if Jameis would have thrown 30 picks again if he came back, but still, Tom Brady will take better care of the ball than Jameis Winston probably. The defense will look better because of it, and it's already a pretty good unit. Now, they have the quote-unquote best run D in the NFL. That isn't. They don't have the best run D in the NFL. Like, they are good in that area. But, like, if you look at the ratio of how many times they passed on him versus ran on him, they got passed on, like, 76% of the time. And, like, it shows. Because you're in shootouts all the time against Jameis. You know, Jameis is going to keep his team in the game or take his team out of the game. But he's going to score points. And you have to score points too, so people are passing the football on them more, and it's working. And, Their run D is showing up in the box score as a good run D, but like they're not getting ran on, so they're not actually a good run D. Like I think they are solid in that area, but the numbers from a like yards allowed standpoint, just like a raw yards allowed standpoint, are like not like they're not really indicative of how good they are in that area because of how much they get passed on versus how much they get ran on. I think their secondary is pretty underrated. If Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis can stay at that level, but like their secondary is pretty good. Their pass rush is pretty good. They bring in back Shaq Barrett. Like, I don't think that he's that great. Like, I don't think he's as good as his sack totals. I do think he's a good edge rusher. I don't think he'll have 20 sacks again. Like, he didn't play all that well. Like, he got a ton of sacks. He converted a ton of his sacks and a ton of his pressures into sacks. Which, like, he played almost at, like, the same way that he normally plays, just with much higher volume. And he just converted his pressure into sacks at a high rate. Which tends to, not hold year to year. Because, like, that's just kind of unstable. But, like, he was solid. He just wasn't. I think the perception on him is way higher than he actually is. But yeah, that's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Let's get into the New Orleans Saints, winners of the division. Collapsed in the playoffs. New Orleans Saints, they lost to the Vikings in very depressing fashion. Collapsed in the playoffs for the third year in a row. You could argue that, not argue, like, they should have, they could have won the game as it was. They had the ball in overtime, but they lost. But they could, like, you could blame the refs for that one. People still want to blame the refs for this one. No. Drew Brees just played bad. Like, it still came down to the last play, but honestly, you didn't deserve to be in that game. You really just didn't deserve to be in that game. Like, Drew Brees played terribly. Like, whatever, man. It's just that, like, the Vikings didn't play all that well either. I don't know. They played pretty well. But, like, Drew Brees wasn't good that game. Like, Drew Brees wasn't good for, like, the last 6 games of the season-ish. That's an issue. But, like, they're still a good team. I still think they're probably the best roster from top to bottom. They have one of the best O-lines, a pretty solid D-line, a decent secondary, some pretty good weapons with Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders now. Drew Brees at quarterback. Like, they are, in my opinion, the best roster from top to bottom in the entirety of the NFL. Now, even with that being said, they still find a way to not cross the hump. Like, they've been 1 year away for 1 year every year. Like, not even 1 year. They've been, like, one play away every year. And they haven't been able to get that one play. Drew Brees hasn't been great in those games, though. Like, it's not like Drew Brees is playing lights out and these, like, weird kind of, not weird, because, like, well, okay, these weird kind of events occur. It's like he's not playing all that well in these games anyway. Like, if he was playing better, you wouldn't be in these situations where you're having Kyle Rudolph in the end zone crying for penalties. Kyle Rudolph in the end zone and you guys are crying for penalties again. It's like you don't have those issues if you guys just play better during the course of the game, which you don't do. Which they don't do. So, like, that makes them, it's a weird thing, because, like, the Rams game, like, you could definitely argue that, they probably should have got a penalty call for the pass interference. not argue. Like, they should have got a penalty call. Anyway, forget that game. We're on to a new season. They're a good team, man. They were a good team last year, even with Teddy in the game starting, which kind of shows like maybe you don't need Drew Brees that bad. Like, Drew Brees is better than Teddy for sure. He's way better than Teddy, but like stylistically, they're pretty similar. The offense wasn't as good with Teddy than with Drew Brees, but it's not like it fell off a cliff. So, like, Drew Brees, like, you have Jameis now, man. Like, honestly, at this point, would it be that crazy to say that Jameis gives you a higher chance to win a Super Bowl than Drew Brees? Because, like, stylistically, Jameis Winston is, like, one of those quarterbacks that could go on a run and be really good. But, you also have the downside of him also being really bad. So, like, he's a quarterback that you could get, like, 3 good games out of. If Drew Brees goes, like, 12 and, like, goes, like, 13-3 in the regular season, you get, like, a 1 seed. Then Jameis Winston comes in for the playoffs. Goes in, like, a 4-game run where he's lights out, or he could suck. It's a double-edged sword. But stylistically, he's on that Eli Manning-esque side of he's going to be aggressive. He can make some plays. He could also lose you the game. But stylistically, he's one of the quarterbacks that you go on a run with. Like Joe Flacco, he is aggressive, or was aggressive. He hasn't been recently, at least. But, like, an aggressive quarterback who's going to make some plays, or he's going to lose you the game. Like, he's similar to those guys compared to one of those slow and steady guys who tend to not be as great in the playoffs unless your name is Tom Brady. But, yeah, those guys, like, I think stylistically Jameis Winston is in the category of an Eli Manning, those guys that can go on a run in the playoffs and win you a Super Bowl. Now, Drew Brees, I'm not saying Jameis is better than Drew Brees. I'm saying that Jameis, at least stylistically, is similar to other quarterbacks that have went on Super Bowl runs who are considered to be not that good. But they have some high end to them. They have some aggressiveness to them. And all I'm saying is stylistically, Jameis Winston is similar to those guys. And Drew Brees is similar to more of the Alex Smith, Tom Brady-ian type of quarterback. But if your name isn't Tom Brady, you can't really make that work. But, like, they're a good team. They have weapons all over the place. Mike Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders. The only issue probably is that, like, they don't have any, like, deep speed on this team or any deep threat. Like, last year it was Ted Ginn, who is, like, the designated deep receiver that they tend to have one receiver in particular run their deep routes. Like, they don't really have Mike Thomas run that tree. Though when he does, he's pretty good running the vertical stuff. He doesn't do it often, though. Definitely doesn't do it often. But, like, Emmanuel Sanders and Mike Thomas are kind of similar stylistically. Like, they don't, like, both of them have a severe lack of deep ball production. Neither of them are receivers that are going to stretch the field vertically. Neither of them. So you have two similar guys on the team now who are going to attack the same area of the field and no one to stretch the field vertically. Like, this is definitely playing the Drew Brees' strengths of being super accurate in the 0 to 9 yard range. But at the same time, I don't think you're maximizing what the team could be. But maybe maybe they think Drew Brees can't really throw the deep ball anymore. Which I don't think is true. Like, he had like the highest accurate pass percentage on deep throws. Granted, he didn't throw them rarely ever, but still, like, and that's a flaw with the offense, man, or the team. Like, they really only win in one way, passing wise. Like, they can't, like, if you take away the intermediate, you take away, like, the quick stuff, like, you could throw Drew Brees off rhythm. Drew Brees is a very rhythmic passer. Loves to get the ball out quick. Like if you can take away the quick stuff and make him go down the field on longer developing stuff, like he's not as good at that. And, arm strength, it doesn't necessarily matter, but I think Drew Brees is pushing it in terms of like having an NFL arm. He barely has an NFL arm, velocity and maybe not velocity, but like arm strength wise, like he's pushing it now. He's pushing the borderlines. He's still he's still probably the most accurate quarterback in the NFL, but like you can see the lack of arm strength throwing to the intermediate ranges of the field. Like sometimes that ball just falls short, and like it's like I think he's pushing it a little bit when it comes to his arm strength. It's almost not there anymore. But like Drew Brees is a good quarterback though. It's just that this team just keeps imploding in the playoffs, and Drew Brees keeps faltering near the second half of the season. Like I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because like I don't know. Like he just struggles in the second halves of the season and like in the playoffs, and they keep on choking it, even though on paper they should be Super Bowl contenders or damn near in the Super Bowl every season, but it doesn't happen, and they keep choking. I really wonder why that is. I really wonder why Drew Brees' play drops off in the second halves of seasons. It's kind of weird. But, like, they have weapons all over the place. They have Alvin Kamara out of the backfield, who, I mean, like, running backs, aren't that important. But, like, he's a pretty good one. And, like, they don't use him a lot. Like, like, his contract year is coming up soon. Maybe this year, too. Was it 2021? Yeah, I think he's a free agent this year. He's drafted in 2017. Yeah, I think he's a free agent this year. I wonder if they'd re-sign him. I mean, they probably do if it was me. Maybe. Like, Alvin Kamara is one of the better running backs in the NFL, in my opinion. Like, probably, like, top 5. But, like, I think, like, you might have to let him go, man. Because at the same time, even though he's a top 5 running back, like, you still have a pretty good infrastructure in terms of, like, an O-line in front of him. Like, he's replaceable. But, yeah, the Saints are a good team. On defense, they're solid. Their secondary is, it's fine. Like, it's not terrible. It's also not good. Like, it will probably hold up. Maybe. They have they have Marshawn Lattimore, who shows up for, like, 3 games a year. Marshawn Lattimore shows up for like 3 games a year. Like, potentially, like, their secondary could potentially be an issue on like a game-to-game basis, but I think for like the course of the season, they'll still be a pretty good secondary. They have Malcolm Jenkins, Marshawn Lattimore, and P.J. Williams, with Marcus Williams as safety, who has been criminally underrated ever since the Minnesota Miracle play where he missed the tackle, but he was still even good that season. Like, Marcus Williams has been one of the better safeties in the NFL for the ever since he entered the league, basically. But, they had Janoris Jenkins, Marshawn Lattimore, P.J. Williams, Malcolm Jenkins, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. What the hell was I about to say? Demario Davis, who was one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL this past season. One of the best linebackers in general this year. Like, they are a good team. They have one of the best O-lines, despite Andrews Pete sucking, and they paid him $50 million. Whatever. They're a good team. They're a good team all around. They're one of the best teams in the NFL. I think they'll probably win the division just because I think they'll be consistently better than the Buccaneers throughout the course of the season. Though they faltered in the end of the season, and I think the Bucs will struggle in the beginning of the season. Like, they could end up at, like, the same record. And they could end up at both, like 12-4-ish, 11-5-ish. Like, they could both end up at that same mark. And they do have a moderately hard schedule. No, they have a pretty... Well, the AFC West sucks besides the Chiefs. and they play against the NFC North that also kind of sucks. So they don't really have that difficult of a schedule. They didn't really have that difficult of a schedule. Like they could, I mean, they could have the best record in the NFL in the regular season potentially, but they have a pretty easy schedule. Though the division is kind of difficult. Like I'm higher on the Panthers. I'll talk about them later today, though. Later in this video, though. Like I think they are underrated, but I don't think they can beat the Saints. Like whatever. The Saints, though, they have first place schedule. Though like the games they play, like they play the NFC North and they play the AFC West. So like that's not difficult. Like I don't think any of those teams are, well, I wouldn't say they're not good. Like I'd say they are definitely question marks. The Chargers and the Broncos. Sorry, excuse me. As the Chargers, like I'm not that high on Justin Herbert or Tyrod Taylor for that matter. Like they could have a rough quarterback situation, and like so could the Broncos. Like we don't know much about Drew Lock, even though I think he's pretty solid. We still don't actually know if he is or not. But like they have a relatively easy schedule. So like I don't see why they couldn't be one of the best teams in the NFL record-wise. Like there's not much reason for them to like regress. Like they weren't historically great. They're just like a kind of like, I wouldn't say they're consistent, but like they're kind of like, I want to say they're consistent, but like they keep having these terrible games in the playoffs, so that would make them inconsistent. So I think during the regular season they are a consistent team, but like they keep having these terrible games in the playoffs. I mean, it's a reoccurring issue. I really don't know why. But let's get into the Carolina Panthers and their odd team. I say they're an odd team because, like, a lot of people think they're a front runner for the number 1 overall pick. Like, I don't think they're that bad. Though I don't think they're that good, though. I think they have just put themselves in purgatory. I think they have put themselves in this middle ground where you're not going to have a good pick for those high-quality starting. Like, I think there's actually a chance they miss out on Lance Lawrence and Fields. Because, like, okay, like, if Jacksonville has a number 1 overall pick, hypothetically, I don't think they're good. I don't think they're bad. I think they're bad enough. I just think Gardner Minshew is too good to only win, like, 2 games. So, like, let's say the Redskins have the number 1 overall pick. Like, personally, I'd be looking for Trevor Lawrence, Fields, Lance. Though I think they'd probably look for Penei Sewell or Jamar Chase, number 1. But I don't know. Like, if you're picking number 1, that means that your quarterback wasn't that good, unless he got hurt. So, like, if the Redskins are picking number 1, or the Washington football team is picking number 1, then like you kind of damn. Like if they're picking number 1, I mean there's a chance because like okay if Jacksonville's like 5, like they could get one of the quarterbacks there, which would probably leave 1 to like 10-ish where the Panthers might end up. Because like I mean I don't know where I think they're gonna be, but like Kyle Allen last year, like people think they're gonna win. Like people think they're gonna have the number 1 overall pick this year, but like Teddy Bridgewater and the weapons around him are better than what Kyle Allen had last year. And I mean Kyle Allen didn't get the number 1 overall pick. Kyle Allen won 5 games. Teddy Bridgewater's better than Kyle Allen. The weapons that he has are better than what Kyle Allen had when they added Robbie Anderson. I mean, their defense still kind of sucks. Even though they went all defense in the draft, like, it still kind of sucks because, like, you have potentially maybe the worst secondary in the NFL. No, it's definitely the Giants. The Giants are a runaway worst secondary in the NFL. But you know, you're not that far off. Dante Jackson's not that good. Eli Apple's not good. Like, Trey Boston's the only viable option there. And, like, he's good. He's a good coverage safety, but like, I don't know. I don't know, bro. Like they're a weird team because I think their offense is actually good enough to like win more than like number one overall pick games. You have to think Kyle Allen won 5 games. Now, granted, a lot of the teams in the NFL are different. That doesn't mean Teddy's automatically going to win more than that. But Teddy is like a lot better than Kyle Allen, and the team offensively, at least, is a lot better than what Kyle Allen had last year. In the offseason, though, they re-sign Christian McCaffrey, which, I mean, that's not a move I'm too high on. He's a good running back. Arguably the best. Probably the best. Had probably people were saying he should win the MVP. Like, if we're talking about value, like, he shouldn't win the MVP. But, like, he was a good player at his position. Like, he had probably the best single season of any running back you'll ever see. And, like, it didn't matter. They still only won 5 games. That's not valuable. Like, if a quarterback was having the best quarterback season we've ever seen, then your team would be, like, 12-4 or, like, 13-3. An example, Patrick Mahomes. But, like, Christian McCaffrey did everything he could. And the team still sucked because Kyle Allen was god-awful during, like, the back stretch of the season. He wasn't that good in the beginning of it either, but, like, he was god-awful in the back stretch of the season, though. The Panthers, they're not a team, man. I think they're stuck in purgatory. Like, the way they drafted, too. Like, I think if all their picks hit, like, they're still only, like, a 9-7 team. Especially because, like, Teddy Bridgewater is also a quarterback that's going to raise your floor, too. Like, I think they're a team that's going to be consistently, like, 8-8, 9-7. Because, I mean, like, Derek Brown, if he hits a ceiling, like, it's still not going to be that valuable. It's still not going to be that big of a value add. He's, like, a primary run-stuffing defensive tackle. And, like, Jeremy Chin has some high upside. He could be similar to an Isaiah Simmons, I guess. Depends on how they deploy him. But, like, there's some interesting pieces on their defense. It's just none of them are really that good. There's some reason to be intrigued for Jeremy Chin and how they use him. I mean, Gross Matos, he's not, like, that good. He's more of a run-stopping guy himself. Like, he hasn't been a productive pass rusher throughout the course of his college career. He's not that traitsy. Whatever. Like, he doesn't have high-end traits. Like, he's not that athletic, even though people talk about his athleticism. Like, he's not that athletic. Like, he didn't run the 40 at the combine. I think that's a telltale sign he might not be that athletic. Like, he did the on-field, but I don't think he's that athletic. It's not, like, especially when you compare him to Jayson Oweh, his teammate, night and day. Oweh looks way more athletic than he does, getting off the line of scrimmage. Anyway, like, the Panthers. Oh, Christian McCaffrey. Yeah, they re-signed him. Like, personally, I wonder what they could have got in a trade for Christian McCaffrey. Like, if it was a first-round pick, then, I mean, like, I'd take that. Like, I wonder what I could have got for McCaffrey. Like, I really want to know. Because, like, personally, I wouldn't have paid him. Like, if you're going to pay a running back, he's probably the guy. But, like, it happens all the time. Everyone says, oh, yeah, this running back is different. This running back breaks the mold. This running back is special. Now, personally, I think Christian McCaffrey probably actually does break the mold from the standpoint of he can play receiver and he can run the ball well at the same time. Though he's not the best at either of those things. Because if you compare Christian McCaffrey to other slot receivers, it's not like he's a high-end slot. Like, he's on the lower end to maybe, like, average tier of slot receiver. So, like, even where he'd be the most valuable, he still isn't all that good at compared to the rest of the league. I mean, compared to running backs, he's probably the best receiver lined up, not in the backfield. But compared to the rest of the NFL, he's still only like an average receiver, and he's not the best runner in the NFL, though he is good at it. Like, he's like the skill set. I don't know, cause like I genuinely think he probably is the one running back that breaks the mold. Though if the offensive line in front of him were to decrease, even though it's not all that great now, I mean I like what they have there actually. I think it's one of the better pass blocking offensive lines. Like Taylor Moton's been a good pass blocker. Russell Okung has been a solid tackle, though I think he might opt out. Matt Paradis has been solid elsewhere, though he wasn't good in Carolina at all. He was terrible. Like they have some pretty decent offensive line pieces in the Trey Turner trade. For Okung, I mean I like it for the Panthers. I like the premise of trading a good guard for a solid tackle, but trading for a 37-year-old or however old Okung is, tackle isn't really a great idea. Like if Okung was younger, it'd be a really good trade instead of just like it's a solid trade because like tackle's a bit more valuable than guard, just based on the fact that edge pressure turns into sacks and turns into pressure a bit more often than it does with interior pressure, making tackles more valuable, and Okung is a solid one. Trey Turner's a good guard. Like, you know, the premise of that trade isn't bad. It's just the fact that Okung is 80 years old is the worst part about it. But they're a good team. They're a solid offensive line, potentially. Like, they're good on the bookends at tackle, though everything else is pretty not good. They're just they're an average team, I think. Like, their secondary is so bad, it might pull them down overall, but, like, they're an average team. And I think that's what they'll be for the future. Unless Joe Brady can turn Teddy Bridgewater into Joe Burrow, which probably isn't possible. So, I just think they're stuck. Like, I just think they're stuck. But that's the Carolina Panthers. I doubt they pick in the top 5. Like, they might pick, like, 10, maybe 11. And that's a bit too steep. I don't know. Like, there's a chance they could miss out on the quarterbacks. Or there's a chance that Lance falls to 11, which is very possible. So, Lance, Fields, one of those falls. I doubt Fields falls to 11. Because I think at that point, if he falls past 5, someone else is coming up to get him. But, yeah. The Panthers... I'm higher on the Panthers like this year at least. Even though long term I don't think they're in a great situation. So yeah. That's the Panthers, man. We're gonna get into the Atlanta Falcons, who are also a pretty odd team as well. Kinda? I don't know. Shit. Consistently year on year, they have one of the better offenses in the NFL. Well, maybe not in the last 2 years, because like Matt Ryan has kind of taken a step back in the last couple of years, which makes the offense worse, obviously. And the offensive line was bad this year. They addressed it a ton in the draft. Caleb McGarry and Chris Lindstrom in the 2019 draft. They adjusted a ton. And, you know, typically, you know, offensive linemen don't normally hit the ground running straight away. And they were a proponent of that this year. Like, Jake Matthews is a good tackle. Everything else, like, Alex Mack is a solid guard, but everything else is bad. You had, James Carpenter at tackle. That's not good. Yeah, that's not good. They're a solid offense year after year. Even though this year, they were still pretty good. They were 7th in EPA per play passing the ball. And overall, they were 9th in EPA per play on offense. So they were still a pretty good offense. even though Matt Ryan made a bit more mistakes than normal. Yeah, their defense was terrible though. They had like probably the worst defense, and like they had a terrible secondary. They just got burned to a crisp every play. They had a bad pass rush and a bad secondary. That's just a bad mix, you know? Like, you can't have neither. Like, if you have one or the other, like, maybe you'll be solid. Like, no, they weren't. They were bad in both areas. And they still are. They had AJ Terrell, who I actually liked. Maybe not where they got him, but I liked the player. Don't like the value. Don't like the pick. It sound like fantasy podcast. Like I didn't like I didn't like where they got him. Though I like the player. I like Marlon Davidson too. I don't know how good he's gonna be in the interior. Like he hasn't played there often in college, so it could be a rough transition early on. Damn, what keeps happening? Could be a rough transition early on. Yeah, they're. Still have Julio Jones, Matt Ryan, Calvin Ridley. They still have one of the better sets of weapons. Though they lost Austin Hooper. I mean, I think he's kind of overrated. Like, I don't think Hayden Hurst is going to be too much worse than Austin Hooper. It's not like Austin Hooper did anything special. And the Browns made him the highest paid tight end. And, he's just a tight end. The scheme is good. And he gets open due to the scheme. And he doesn't do much after that. But I think Hayden Hurst is a better guy after the catch. He can maybe produce more than Austin Hooper if they use him in a similar role to Austin Hooper. The offensive line could take a step up as offensive linemen tend to not to suck less. They tend to suck less the longer their career goes on, most of the time. So maybe they start to take a step up, and the offensive line is a bit better next season, even though that could also not happen. I think overall they're a pretty decent unit, but they still. I think they're a decent team, but like their secondary still sucks, and they're like banking on AJ Terrell to like hit immediately. Because if he doesn't, they're kind of done. If he doesn't hit the ground running, their secondary is worse than it was last year because they lost their best player from last year, and they could be getting Keanu Neal back. I think Deion Jones missed games last year because he does it every year. Even though I'm not 100% sure about that, he's one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL. Even though he might not be too great at much else. I mean, I think he's good. He's not the best tackler in the world. He didn't miss any games this year. That's like a first for Deion Jones. But yeah, he's still one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL. Makes a ton of plays in coverage. He's a great coverage linebacker. It's just that he doesn't do much else. But yeah, Keanu Neal, who's virtually a linebacker as well. And a pass rush that's still bad, and a secondary that's still bad. Like, the defense is still pretty bad, and the offense is still pretty good. Like, they're probably going to be a similar team than they were last year, but they have a bit of an easier schedule this year, so, they could probably win a bit more games than they did last year. What was their record last year? They weren't even that bad. They weren't even that bad. They were, 7-9. I say they weren't that bad. They were 7-9. They weren't. They could be 8-8, 7-9 this year. They're virtually the same team, which could probably be a bad thing, because that same team still wasn't really a good team, and they lost their best cornerback and replaced him with AJ Terrell, who they need to hit immediately, which might not happen. And if it doesn't happen, then you're in a really bad spot. Really bad spot. That secondary and defense in a whole could be really rough, could be really bad. the offense could still be like they're virtually the same team. They're virtually the same team again, but maybe a worse version of themselves. Like they could go 6-10, and then at that point, then what do you do? Like, this team. They were a Super Bowl team. They were a good roster on paper, offensively at least. Their defense is terrible though. Like, I don't know, man. Like the Falcons are a really odd team. Because, they have all the talent to beat maybe any team in the NFL, offensively at least. As shown when they beat the 49ers. But then they lose to, teams like the Vikings that aren't that good. They're just a rough, they're just an odd team. They should be better than they are. Often, but I don't know, man. That's the video. They're such an odd team to predict, too. Because they have such a wide range of outcomes. Because there's always a game or two where their offense is gonna be lights out. Their defense is gonna play well for that game, or their offense they're playing against is gonna play bad for that game. Because a quarterback could have a bad day and they would look good that day, on defense at least. You don't miss some open throws. If they play against a team with a bad quarterback, their defense is gonna look. That's not even true. They played Jacoby Brissett, and their defense still looks non-viable. They are a bad defense. They're a terrible defense, and they're still the same defense. They're still a good offense. I keep repeating myself, man. It's they're a rough team. They're a rough team to predict. If you're a Falcons fan, bro, purgatory is your place, bro. You guys are stuck in. We're on offense good enough to beat anybody. On defense, we're terrible still, and we're still gonna be stuck with the 15th pick. Just at this point, just bottom out. But it is what it is. This is the end of the podcast, I guess. Subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, all that YouTube stuff. I'm gonna attempt to get the podcast on Apple Podcast or Spotify. All that type of stuff. Gotta work some shit out behind the scenes. But, Untitled Football Podcast. And I'm out.